Hello, everyone. I'm Simon Ford of Ford's Gin. Martinis, gin and tonics, Negronis, great classic cocktails is what I'm about. But I also love to hear of great recipes from great bartenders from around the world, which is why we've partnered with Beyond the Drink for this season. Cheers.
Well, you just heard from the man himself, Simon Ford, and this season of Beyond the Drink is presented by Ford's Gin. I'm Cappy, and this is a segment where some of the best bartenders in the country explain the stories and recipes behind their favorite drinks. To get the recipe from this episode, check out the episode notes in your podcast player or go to beyondtheplatepodcast.com. Beyond the Drink is a production of Beyond the Plate. This episode is made possible with the help of our friends at Folk Salt. Yet another bartender using salt, everybody. I've said it in some past episodes, and I'll say it again. Why not? If you have a great quality salt like Folk Salt, don't look past the wonderful world of cocktails. We're probably used to using salt in something like a margarita, but today we have a bartender from our Beyond the Drink series that's using salt as a component in their cocktail. They're actually making something they call a seawater solution for their cocktail. Pretty brilliant, if you ask me. So keep listening to this episode to hear how and why she makes a seawater solution. I'm excited to share more about Folk Salt. They've been Sweden's premier salt manufacturer for over 190 years. 190 years. That's a long time. They produce beautiful 100% natural Mediterranean sea salt flakes. You almost do not want to eat this. It's so beautiful. By the way, yes, we're talking cocktails today, but tomatoes, finishing steak, pork, fish, chicken, the list goes on and on and on. Anyhow, if you cannot find it in your local grocery store, it is available on Amazon. To learn more about Folk Salt and all of their different flavors, go to folksaltusa.com. That's FALKSALTUSA.com. And follow them on social media at Folk Salt USA. Folk Salt, we thank you. All right, everyone, for this episode, we're talking with Sadé Stamps out of Oakland, California. You can find her on Instagram at Say Sweetwater. That's at SAYSWEETWATER. Sadé is going to walk us through a drink that I'm guessing bears a story. It's called Nothing Nice. Please enjoy this episode as we go beyond the drink with Sadé Stamps. Hi, Sadé. I guess there's only one place to start here.
And that would be with the cocktail.
Let's do it. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks for being here. Nothing Nice. What's the story?
Honestly, the recipe itself was really easy to, conceive. I love Forged Gin. But the name, that's always like the thing. Sometimes you start with the name. Sometimes you end with the name, whatever. I typically end with the name. And the name really came from feeling a little overwhelmed with like the way that people are dining, like in this whole COVID thing. And, as the beverage director, I feel like I might, use this to my advantage a little bit, but I really try to empower my team to just like kind of level out balance, like always offer like great service, you know what I mean? But like someone like, yelling in your face about their margarita being too sweet with their mask off, like, it's like how do we move on from that? So give that great service, but just know, just know that you don't have to like accept all the pieces. I feel like the terrain of dining is a lot different these days, and we deserve to feel good just as much as our guests want to feel good and have that level of escapism, So yeah, Nothing Nice came from that.
Got it. Take us through this delicious sounding cocktail.
Wonderful. So the cocktail itself, it's a mix between a Trinidad Sour and a Last Word, the Last Word being my personal favorite cocktail. So with the Trinidad Sour, I'm using like a nice 1/2 ounce of Angostura bitters. So it has like a really, really nice balance. So with the Forged Gin, of course, I love all of the notes of Forged Gin. It is an amazing, amazing cocktail gin. I'm using 1.5 ounces of that. I'm also using 1/2 ounce of Mezcal to offer a little bit of smoke. So a nice smoky Mezcal will be good with this one. 0.75 ounces of lime juice to offer some acidity, of course. That nice 1/2 ounce of Angostura, as I mentioned. And to give it a a little bit more brightness and a little bit of fruity notes. I'm using a 1/4 ounce of peach liqueur. And to balance it all out, I love to season my cocktails. I'm using a couple of drops of a seawater solution, and I'm using salt in that and just water to make that. And as it pertains to building, you're going to build all that together. We're going to add a nice thick slice, a nice thick orange peel as we shake with ice. Double strain, give it a nice manicured orange peel, and enjoy.
I love it. All right. Take us through seawater solution. I love how you used air quotes with seasoning your cocktail, which is brilliant because I'm a chef by trade. So for me, I love cocktails. And for me, I always hear like the bitters are kind of that seasoning that takes it to another level. But I think this is so smart. Take us through, and it's pretty simple, but tell us about like that seawater solution.
Yeah. So in this one, I'm using a Maldon salt. I use a like half smoked and just half regular. And I just mix that with some hot water. You can even use, room temperature water. The salt is going to dissolve either way. It keeps for a while. But using it in the cocktails, I find sometimes like I've added so many things, like sometimes you just need that one thing. Even when you subtract something, you add something else in its place. And, salt is kind of that thing for me. The smallest, and just like in food, like the smallest bit of salt can really change the whole situation. It can push some things into the corner and bring some other things out. So I personally really love using salt. Mezcal does that for me too. And overproof rum does it for me too sometimes. But using the salt specifically, it's a thing. So salting or seasoning your cocktails, however you want to, but that little bit of salt, just it does it for me.
Yeah. And I know Maldon is like the coarser, beautiful, flaky salt. But if someone doesn't have that, can they use kosher salt or another salt? Yeah. And the objective is mainly to dissolve it in the water. So you have this, as you said, salty solution.
Yeah. Yeah. It goes a long way, lasts for a long time. But I find, cocktails to be such a personal experience. Of course, you're not going to drink something that doesn't really settle right with you. So I really think using whatever you have on hand, whatever you just really like to use is always great.
So I have another question. You have a half ounce of Angostura bitters, which, correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like a lot. Mm-hmm. Like for a typically you see a couple of drops or a few shakes or something like that. So talk to me about your use of bitters.
Well, the Trinidad Sour uses a hefty amount of Angostura bitters. It is a phenomenal sour cocktail, super simple, very delicious. And I tend to use a lot of bitters. If you look through any of the bar books that I've added recipes to, it's 12 dashes of bitters or something like that. But I just find that sometimes just my personal palate, as well as the feedback that I get from customers when I make them, dealer's choice one-offs, I find that that hefty amount of bitters really adds a really nice balance to it. Angostura liqueur has some added sugar in it. So sometimes I don't want that sweetness, or I really might just want to dry my cocktail out. If I'm taking a mildly sweet approach, adding that hefty amount of bitters really dries it out and it makes the sweetness a lot more palatable. Definitely go for it with the bitters, but a few dashes it's not enough for me sometimes.
And bitters is pretty good for you, isn't it?
Yes.
I mean, it's like
yes,
a heal,
they are.
Yeah. Which is awesome. How fantastic. I love it. And then also something interesting I noticed in your technique is you are shaking this, but you're shaking it with, as you mentioned, with an orange slice or peel or something like that within, which you don't usually see. Some people muddle, some people, add it on top for garnish, but I like incorporating the wedge into the shake.
Yeah, also the oils from the orange are going to also add a little bit of dryness to it as well. And I think that the oils from the orange, as they're not being muddled, you know what I mean? But just gently being brought out in the cocktail, they also add to the notes of the gin, which is such a beautiful star in the cocktail. So you might use the orange peel for different reasons, but for me in this cocktail, it adds a little bit more dryness, and it also gives you this kind of background note, that you don't totally get from the express on the top, because that kind of goes, as you drink those first few sips, you're drinking all that off of the top. So incorporating that, like that flavor of the oils throughout the whole cocktail. That's basically what I was going for with that.
I wish everyone could see you explaining all of this, because it's like really telling a story, like with these ingredients in the cocktail. Like, your hand motions are like getting me excited to drink. I love that. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing this cocktail. I do want to touch upon some social impact and giving back for our companion podcast, Beyond the Plate. A lot of chefs and restaurateurs, as you know, they give back in many different ways, and bartenders are no different. So we'd love to give you a moment to shed some light on a charitable organization or a cause that you may want to raise awareness for.
I will always, always, always talk about this initiative until all moms have housing. But in Oakland, there's an initiative called Moms for Housing. It has a really beautiful story. Some houseless mothers took up residence in a vacant home, and it became a whole thing. And over time, they actually were able to basically win over that home, and it is now part of basically a land trust. But their fight did not end with that. It is a continuous mission. As we all know, the rates of homelessness in the world, the US, in Oakland particularly, are outrageous, And when we think about what children in particular, should be afforded at minimum, and one of those things is to not have to go through homelessness, to like not have to watch your parent struggle, to provide for you, that becomes a part of your conditioning. So Moms for Housing is a wonderful initiative that I will always fight for.
I love it. That's great. Thank you for sharing that. So you like to tell stories, as I read, you like to tell stories through libations and the cultures you hold close to heart. Talk to me more about that and where you find your inspiration for cocktails too.
I find a lot of my inspiration through a lot of vintage musings, honestly, but also the reflections of the people that are around me. They inspire me so much on a day-to-day basis. And a lot of my personal view of drinking culture comes through a lot of my younger experiences. Just like watching all the joy that people have, when they're able to share food and drink with one another. I consider myself like, just like a young little like auntie. Like I mimic these like older women in my life so much with like almost everything that I do. And a lot of the cocktails that I come up with, I think about my mom, and I think about these beautiful women that raised me and, how they like their drink. So I hold that really close. I hold my childhood experiences really close around food and drink. And yeah, the communities that I represent, Black womanhood, all of the things.
You're from DC?
Yeah.
Did you grow up in DC?
I did. I moved to Oakland about 9 years ago.
You love it out there?
Do I love it out there? Or do I love it DC, or do I love it Oakland? I love Oakland. I always end up back in Oakland, I left Oakland for some time, less than a year, came back. I love it. This is my home.
Yeah. That's cool. Very cool. Can we discuss the pop-up, Wild Seed?
Yeah. So with Wild Seed is my little antidote to offering people, as I like to call it, I offer them a remedy to decolonizing their cocktail. And really, when I think about it, I think about a lot of the ingredients that I really, really love, things that people they're like, why would you put that in a cocktail? And I'm like, but it's delicious, right? So it's that question, and just like stepping outside of the norm of what we think, good cocktails are, stepping outside of the history of pre and post Prohibition. I feel like people kind of live in the span, a really small span of cocktail making. And I like to dig into cocktails as remedies, and even just a remedy for like a bad day, but like thinking about how some of the simplest things that we'll enjoy on a hot day, like a mojito, that started as a medicinal remedy, So I really bring in a lot of the things that I make a lot of tinctures, drams, syrups, all those things, and as you just mentioned with bitters, it started as a medicinal remedy. So just like really picking apart those things and offering people really beautiful cocktails as a result, and allowing them to just think past what we know as the world of making cocktails. Aside from employing myself, I'm employing other Black, brown, queer, trans people to, have space and to also be able to represent themselves and express themselves through their cocktails too. So a lot of it is educational, but a lot of it also is about the joy of drinking.
Yeah, that's so cool. We're going to keep an eye on that to see how that continues to evolve in a fun, positive, educational way. Awesome. Let's do a speed round before we close it out.
Woo.
Name the cocktail that inspired you to get behind the bar.
Let me see. Probably rum punch. No, I'm not going to lie. Probably rum punch. The cocktail that allowed me to be really serious about bartending was a rum punch.
I love a good rum punch. Do you remember the first drink that you had on a menu?
The first drink that I had on a menu, it was a Boilermaker, a local DC stout with Mezcal. That was like the first thing. Dive bar days.
The last cocktail you made at home?
Last cocktail I made at home, a spritz.
Do you put Prosecco in your spritz or just bubbly water?
I do both.
Name a smell behind the bar you love.
A smell behind the bar that I love, expressed citrus, for sure.
Name a smell behind the bar you hate.
Dairy.
One cocktail every home bartender should have in their repertoire.
Definitely a good margarita. Like your own personal, margarita recipe,
Sadé, this was fun. I wish we could do 10 more of these. This cocktail sounds amazing. I love all the work you do. I'm going to keep following Wild Seed. Hope to get out to Oakland one time, hopefully soon. Thank you. Thank you for spending some of the afternoon with us.
Thank you. This was fun.
To get the recipe from this episode, check out the episode notes in your podcast player or go to beyondtheplatepodcast.com. This episode was produced by myself along with Ian Cohen, Joel Yetton, and Sean Petrosian. Find me and keep up to date with this podcast across all social media platforms at On Cappy's Plate or go to beyondtheplatepodcast.com. Beyond the Plate is on all the socials at BT Plate Podcast. Please rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast on your listening site of choice. Thank you for listening to Beyond the Drink, a production of Beyond the Plate. I'm Cappy.